Nobody at the Winmore Grand ever tipped the valet who parked their cars. Like his hands actually mattered. Pause 2 secs. That was the quiet, unspoken rule of the place, and Marcus Whitfield had absorbed it the way you absorb weather. Not with resentment exactly. Just with the flat acceptance of a man who had learned over 4 years exactly where he stood in the hierarchy of a 5-star hotel. He was 38 years old, broad-shouldered, careful with his movements in a way that looked almost formal, wearing a maroon valet vest that never quite fit right no matter how many times they altered it. Guests handed him their keys without looking at his face. Some didn't hand them at all, just tossed them, the way you'd toss something to a dog you trusted not to bite. He caught every single one. He never said anything about it. He'd learned to listen to cars instead of people. It was easier, and in its own way, more honest. Pause 2 secs. On a Thursday evening in late autumn, a black sedan pulled into the circular drive 40 minutes late for what was, according to the hushed conversations of the front desk staff, the single most important meeting the Winmore Grand had hosted in its history. Elliot Sharma, the hotel's primary investor, the man whose signature on a single document could either fund a full renovation or quietly close the place within 18 months, stepped out already checking his watch. Already tense, already speaking in the clipped tone of someone whose day had gone sideways before it started. Marcus opened the driver's door. As he did 50 times a night and reached for the keys, that was when he heard it. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a faint, specific irregularity underneath the engine's idle, a rhythm that shouldn't have been there. The kind of sound that most people, including most mechanics, would drive straight past without a second thought. Pause 2 secs, sir, Marcus said. Before he could stop himself, you might want to have someone look at your timing belt before you drive this again. Within the next 2 weeks, I'd guess. Elliot Sharma stopped mid-stride and turned around slowly, the way a person turns when they're not sure they heard something correctly. Excuse me? The timing belt, Marcus repeated, quieter now, already regretting having said anything at all. There's a slight irregularity in the idle. It's subtle, but it's there. I could be wrong. He wasn't wrong. He was never wrong about this, not once. Not in the 11 years since he'd stopped letting himself think about engines. The way he used to. Pause 2 secs. Elliot's assistant, standing a few feet away with a tablet full of the evening's schedule, let out a short laugh that wasn't unkind so much as reflexive, the laugh of someone hearing. A valet diagnosed an engine problem and filing it immediately under things not worth taking seriously. Elliot didn't laugh. He looked at Marcus for a long moment, the irritation from his delay still sitting visibly on his face. And something underneath it shifted slightly, like a man recalculating a number he'd assumed was fixed. You could be wrong, Elliot said slowly. Or you could be right, and I have no way of knowing which. Because you're wearing a name tag that says valet and nothing else. It wasn't cruel. It was just true, and Marcus had heard variations of that particular truth for 4 years running. Pause 2 secs. However, neither of them had any idea that this 30-second exchange in a hotel driveway was about to unravel 11 years of a story. Marcus had never told a single person at that hotel, and that Elliot Sharma, on the worst night of his business year, was about to need exactly the kind of expertise he'd almost driven past without noticing. Pause 2 secs. Marcus Whitfield had spent 9 years in formula-adjacent motorsport engineering before he ever wore a valet vest. Not driving building. He'd been part of a small independent team's powertrain division. The kind of role that never made headlines but decided races anyway. The kind of job where you learn to hear a $200,000 engine the way a doctor learns to hear an irregular heartbeat. He'd been good. Genuinely, specifically good, the sort of good that other engineers quietly resented and team principals quietly relied on. Then the team folded, a sponsorship collapse. Sudden and total, the kind that motorsport teams rarely survive intact. Marcus had 2 young daughters at the time and a mortgage that didn't care about the state of professional racing sponsorships. He took the first steady job he could find that didn't require him to uproot his family or take on new debt to retrain for something else. That job was parking cars at a hotel in a city 300 miles from the last racetrack he'd ever set foot on. He told himself, at first, that it was temporary. 4 years later, it no longer felt like anything at all. Just the shape his life had settled into. The way water settles into whatever container it's poured in. Pause 2SECS. I used to work in motorsport engineering, Marcus said finally, because the silence had stretched long enough that saying nothing had become its own kind of answer. Powertrain division. 9 years. The team folded in 2015. Elliot's assistant stopped typing. Elliot himself went very still. 2015, he repeated. Which team? Marcus told him. And watched Elliot Sharma's expression shift from polite skepticism into something closer to recognition. Then into something closer to disbelief because it turned out, in the specific and almost absurd way that these things sometimes happen, that Elliot Sharma had been a minor financial backer of that exact team during its final 18 months, had personally reviewed the engineering reports Marcus's division had produced, and had spent a considerable amount of money at the time being deeply impressed by work he'd never once connected to a name. You wrote the thermal efficiency reports, Elliot said slowly. The ones that got passed around to 3 other teams the following season. Some of them, Marcus said. Most of them, actually. Pause 2 secs. Elliot didn't get in his car that night. He stood in the circular drive of the Winmore Grand for nearly 20 minutes. Missing the first part of the meeting he'd been 40 minutes late for already. Asking Marcus questions about a decade of work that no one at this hotel had ever thought to ask about, not out of politeness, but because it had genuinely never occurred to anyone that the man catching their keys might be catching them with hands that used to build engines. Other people trusted their lives to at 200 miles an hour, the timing belt. It turned out was 2 weeks from failing. Exactly as Marcus had said, pause 2 secs. What happened after wasn't a fairy tale reversal. Elliot didn't hand Marcus a racing job on the spot. And Marcus didn't quit valet parking that same week to chase a career that had moved on without him for 11 years. But Elliot Sharma owned, among his various investments, a small engineering consultancy that worked with automotive manufacturers on efficiency testing, and 3 weeks later, Marcus sat across a desk from its director for an interview he never would have gotten through a resume alone. Because a resume with an 11-year gap and no explanation gets discarded before anyone reads the rest of it. And Marcus knew that better than anyone, he got the job. Not out of pity, and not as a favor. The technical interview alone lasted 2.5 hours. And the director later admitted she'd stopped taking notes halfway through because she'd simply stopped needing to check his answers against anything. Pause 2 secs. Marcus still drives past the Winmore Grand sometimes, on his way to a consultancy office instead of a valet stand. He doesn't feel bitterness about the 4 years he spent there. He said more than once that catching keys people threw at him taught him a specific kind of patience that's turned out to be useful in rooms full of executives who don't yet know what he's capable of either. His daughters are older now. The mortgage got paid one way or another. The way mortgage generally do. Elliot Sharma still tells the story at dinner sometimes, usually as a way of making a point about the people companies overlook without ever meaning to. He tends to end it the same way. I almost got in that car, he says. I was 40 minutes late, irritated, not listening to anything except the sound of my own schedule falling apart. And the man everyone had trained themselves not to look at was the only person in that entire driveway who actually knew what he was talking about. As emotional music swells, pause 2 secs. If you believe that expertise doesn't announce itself with a title, and that the person catching your keys, cleaning your table, or standing quietly in the background might be carrying an entire life you never thought to ask about, please like this video, subscribe to Kindness Tales, and share it with someone who needs the reminder to look twice before they judge what someone else is capable of.